Hey, what's up? Haven't been on in a little bit, other than IG Lives. Hopefully, everyone's enjoying what we're doing there, and trying to maybe at times hear for some folks that maybe not always so familiar with, but have some really good things to share, and also just to demonstrate that folks can be communicating without always talking about clinical decisions and clinical topics. A little bit of an update. We've let 5 people in to the mentorship. We are in month 1. What we're going to do is get 1 month done and then go to another cohort. So we have that, again, very thankful, fairly expansive list of folks that showed interest. Again, I'm not so suppositious that just because you signed up and said you're interested means that it's going to be something that you'll want to do, but sit tight. We're going to continue to add folks and just make sure that I'm able to deliver what I think I can deliver and what I think you'd be paying for there. So we're going to be looking at that probably towards the end of September. Obviously, my schedule is going to change a little bit here after the wedding, and probably being in a plane and being in a car quite a bit, getting to these different cities. Locally, we're going to get the gym open, hopefully end of the month. That'll be in Palm Beach Gardens. Super excited with with Brendan Hayden, what we're going to do there, and Allie will start getting back into some in-person. Mitch Sadowski, there's going to be some really quality things happening out of there, really revolving around golf as well as general fitness. So, stay in touch with that. I do have an office available to me. Haven't used it yet in Boca Raton, but I have been in Fort Lauderdale quite a bit in Dan Hellman's office, and I do expect to be sharing patients with him as we have folks come in. Obviously, places like West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami are places people want to go, and if there's a way to create an experience of several days to get experience with some really competent therapists and trainers, and maybe even some rounds of golf, we're going to really try to put together some interesting things to bring people to South Florida. So a little bit of update there on some of those things. But I just got back from MI40, where I train in Tampa. Maybe if you saw on Instagram, have some fun with. I was wearing a different shirt when I was training, and some everything that I repped on there I paid for. Nothing is. I think I just feel better saying that, because there's so many people out there that'll just switch their brand just because somebody gives them a little bit more money. So those junk headbands, bought everyone. The mouthpiece, bought them. Yeah, just I always felt like I used to wear a headband a lot when I trained in Philly, and I just felt like it's like putting on a uniform. When you go to train, you wear something different to kind of create some mental focus. But I've just always been so lucky with everywhere that I've lived to be able to find a gym where you can train the way you want to train, and obviously that's probably a little bit more available with the advent of more intense training models in the commercial space. Well, wasn't always like that, but I've always been lucky, even going back to growing up in Toms River, but in one town over in Bricktown, New Jersey, was a Bally's Total Fitness, and that might scare some people. Dude, they had 100-pound wheels. I could use chalk. I mean, it was my first 500-pound deadlift that happened in that gym. The first time I ever wore a bench shirt in Bally's. So, and then moving on, obviously meeting Bill Crawford in Glens Falls, changed my outlook on training, and somebody I really still look up to, and I remember some things I won't say that was requested of me very early in my time there. But I'll tell you what, with Bill Crawford as your coach, I'm very confident I would have at that time gotten into the 2200, 23, 2400 total category, which at that time was a big deal. When I went for 800, which I never would have done without Bill Crawford, that was a big deal then. Now you got dudes repping 800 raw. So in Georgia, Titan Gym, which was a bunch of disciples from Opelika with Auburn, and just a bunch of monsters there. And of course in Philly at Iron Sport, which I've been back once since moving away many years ago, and that it's just cool to be able to go, just be lucky to be able to find these places. When I went back to New Jersey, Thomas Phillips gym, always being able to get after it. So lots of cool things, and had fun with those pictures, even though I was again sitting on a leg extension. So, but driving over here to Tampa, I don't remember what exactly. It might have been a Redcon. I call it War Machine, but I don't even know what it's called. Total War, and you get this, you get kicked with all this caffeine, you get these bouts of lucidity. So one of the topics that came to my mind was stretching after training, or stretching. Does stretching have a role to combat the question if training makes you tight? So if you lift a lot, are you going to be inflexible? That is a little bit of a stem off of some of the things we talked about with Will Wayland about getting bigger. Well, getting bigger, if it doesn't affect your golf swing in terms of your mobility or hypertrophy getting in the way, I'm not sure that it's a significant thing. But is that even happen? Well, a little bit of, I don't know what's my opinion here, or what's fact, or what's soft science, so I'll give you my perspective and then where this information's coming from. Well, I think that the first thing that we should talk about, which I feel very linear on, is that should you be stretching after training? And I think that's an answer is a resounding yes. Now, several years ago, we were at Nike, and the individual, Bruno something or other, and he had a big sports psychology pedigree, coming from one of the EPL teams, and very accomplished. I think he was in Taekwondo. So we're talking about flexibility, and I think a lot of people know I've got some experience in Taekwondo. And Val Nasetikin, always giving credit to my mentor. I'm pretty sure Keith was there as well. And he said, I won't do the accent, but something to the effect that, of course, you should be stretching after training. Of course, it's stupid to think you're going to get flexible. That's idiots. But of course, to improve the uptake of anabolic factors that you just built up in your training. And I remember saying, wait, what? Say that again? And he said, yeah, of course, you should be engaging in static stretching after you train to increase the uptake of anabolic factors that you just increased during your training. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's that. And intuitively, every time I revved up to do the Van Damme, I would always do my split work after training. And, I was able to do it. I haven't done that in a long time. I don't always seem to have the time, or maybe I just don't feel like doing it anymore. But we went and he's like, the research is in Russian. It doesn't even translate. So we actually found the research. I can find it. It was in one of my early presentations, maybe almost 8 to 10 years ago, when we did, I think the title of that talk that summer was called Cracking the Stretching Code. I'm sure you could find it. I actually think there is a voiceover plus the PowerPoint on Larry Draper's website, where you can probably get it for a couple bucks, where one of the things we talked about was finding the Russian literature. And at that time, I believe Cal Dietz found one of his graduate students to translate this Russian literature, because Russian doesn't always translate very easily, which is why a lot of the Eastern Bloc training is sometimes challenging to really wrap your head around, because the words don't even mix, much less have a very clear linear message that we expect out of the research. So it basically translated exactly what Val said, that somehow the elastic nature of the connective tissue would create opening of channels that allowed these anabolic factors to enter the muscle cell. Now, there's probably a lot of other things that are happening as a result of stretching after training. I'm sure there is some coming down of parasympathetic factors. You have opportunity to work on basically a cool down, which should improve the effect of training. And maybe this Russian literature was giving us a more molecular level of understanding of why some of the things that we really don't do that much of, whether it's passive stretching or any kind of cool down, because of course in a Western training model, particularly a commercial training model, the training has to happen in 1 hour. And people feel that you're doing more if you are finishing your workout with some kind of significant cardiovascular training, which is a good thing. I don't know that it's the only thing, and maybe you're still trying to fit 10 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag. The cool down always seems to fall off at the end. So as far as static stretching, no, not to get flexible, but to improve this uptake of anabolic hormones. And if that happens, you probably won't get tight. So I think there's where we'll start. I think there's a lot of reason to look at those things. But let's say you don't do that, and the question again is, do you get tight? Well, I don't think you get tight after one session, but I do think some things very deleterious, or at least subjectively negative, can happen. Story in the middle 2000s, when I was in Philly, we always have the rookies train early. They had to get on the court, very traditional NBA culture, where the rookie's always going to get extra work. And one of the rookies was, you now know him as probably the best sixth man to ever play, Lou Williams. Never went to college, came out of Atlanta, drafted out of high school, which at that time was allowed. And one day he comes up to me and he says, "Chuck Wagon, can I lift after practice right now? I know it's not what we're supposed to do, but please, can I do that?" And he was very respectful in this request because he had just had a poor day shooting, and he blamed it on lifting. And the lifting made him tight, and his shot was off. And at that time, where I was, I thought that was a bunch of nonsense. Lifting doesn't affect your shot. That's ridiculous. And I was very, very wrong, as I learned a long time. Now, of course, the way he asked, there was absolutely no reason to say, no, you can't do that, like some kind of nonsensical college type of strength and conditioning situation. He's a man, even though he was 17, 18 years old. Of course, you lift after practice. But at the time, I scoffed at it. And years later, again, learning things from Omega Wave, and the suggestion would be that if we had, and I don't remember what happened at that time, but if we had gone through a very intense, or explosive training session, then we should have every reason to believe that DC potential probably would have exceeded. And if in a norm, if it's above negative 40 millivolts, then that would be a very, very high DC potential. I mean, you're really, really wired. And maybe for a power lifter, or if you're a special teams guy in American football, even a goalie in regular football, to be really amped up, a sprinter, not the end of the world. But for sports that require precision, shooting a basketball, quarterback, golf, etc., where very, very precise levels of mastery of your motor skill are very, very important, a very high DC potential could be very, very negative and negatively impact your mastery of that skill. So, of course, Lou Williams didn't forget how to shoot the basketball. But what happened was his nervous system was probably so amped up, and in his mind, he attributed that to lifting probably heavy or explosively, and that made him tight, which allowed, and I think we know that's not how motor skill performance works. However, the nervous system has a significant impact. I mean, he didn't get tight. If we measured him flexibility or mobility, he would have been the same. But at that time, we didn't know, or I didn't know so much about those measures that Omega Wave can tell us. So I don't think you can get tight after one training session, but I do think you can certainly feel tight. And that brings us to the next point, which maybe can get you to these areas where your flexibility or mobility goes in the negative direction. And here's what I think happens. If you are consistently under-recovered from the common enemies of hypoxia and acidosis. Now, I talk about those two things ad nauseum because I think they cause a lot of bad things, and I think everyone can do something positive to recover from hypoxia and acidosis because they are very, very necessary to introduce to the organism in order to create adaptation. So we're going to keep our friends close and our enemies closer. But I think from a fitness level, a medical level, sleep, nutrition, psychology, and load management, we can all target hypoxia and acidosis. Well, what I think happens, and again, we've probably talked about this in other videos, other segments, when acidosis is high and or under recovered, we will be far more susceptible to those things that Lou Williams was probably experiencing called spontaneous electrical activity. Other people call it tone. I won't call it tone because tone can mean a lot of things. The literature is clear. SEA, spontaneous electrical activity, where you are at complete rest subjectively, and EMG, both surface and needle, will show that there's muscle contractions. Well, if those muscle contractions continue because you are continually under recovered and your body is constantly creating these muscle contractions that you don't probably feel and don't qualify as spasm yet, at some point that muscle's working and it starts to shift closer towards this anaerobic or limited oxygen system because it's starting to get fatigued. The spontaneous electrical activity still requires ATP. And if there's not significant blood flow and oxygen to that area because there's really no reason to, you don't know that you're doing it, then of course we do know that in hypoxic environments, collagen will turn over. And if that collagen turns over in a spontaneous fashion, well, then I think we could probably, over time, change the direction of the collagen of the contractile tissue and probably lose mobility and or flexibility. I think that can happen. Now, that's a series of things, and a lot of way I think, well, where's the research? Well, don't worry, this is a blog. I can say whatever I want. I think there's research to support acidotic environments creating spontaneous electrical activity. There is research to support spontaneous electrical activity in a continued fashion will then lead to hypoxic areas in the muscle tissue. And then we also know, the research will tell us that hypoxic tissue creates messenger RNA to transcribe alpha-pro-1 collagen, aka scar tissue. Again, scar tissue isn't bad, but if it's being modeled under the orders of a spontaneous nature instead of direction that you are creating volitionally, well, then you're probably going to wind up with this narrative of, well, it's healing in all this random direction. Well, it's only random because you didn't tell it to go in the direction that you wanted to. So again, maybe we should be stretching after we train to limit these types of factors. I don't think anything bad can happen, but again, it's time, and everyone is pinched for time at some degree. Whether it's the difference between 2 and 3 hours, where God, who has that kind of time? Maybe today I did, but ultimately, certainly in a commercial environment where we're so conditioned that we're fitting training into our day in this 50 to 60 to 65 minutes. Maybe it's 90 minutes if it's an athletic development for the young kids, but stretching after training makes a lot of sense, and I think there's some concepts in terms of uptake of anabolic factors. That's of value. Can you really get tight? Well, we should appreciate there's a difference between feeling tight and amped up, which can be measured with DC potential. But over the long term, I do think that if we stretch after we train and start to account for recovery from these transient acidotic conditions, we can minimize some of these factors that make muscles tight, make muscles dense. Tight is, again, one of these words like tone, you could say whatever. But I do think in the literature we're getting to appreciate the term densification. The first time I heard densification was in studying fascial manipulation from Antonio Stecco and his children, and also Warren Hammer, and Stefano was another one. I don't remember his last name, but he was out in Scottsdale, because it's a lot of different courses that you have to take. So perhaps tissue is quality, then it's spontaneous, and then it's densified. But if it stays densified and you continue to be under recovered, then tissue becomes fibrotic, and then it becomes significantly difficult to remodel. But I do think it can. I do think it can remodel. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of resources, particularly of your time and force. And sometimes you got to get someone else's hands then. But you don't want tissue to get fibrotic. And then now all of a sudden, when the tissue is fibrotic, you are tight. You have changed. You have taken your 3. On your active straight leg raise and taking it to a 1. And maybe you got a lot of hypertrophy, and maybe you got a real big RDL, but if I stick your thumb in that hamstring and there's a referral, then there's good reason to engage in some kind of recovery, some kind of therapy to mitigate the densification of the fascia and the tissue, because we didn't stretch after we trained. So in a nutshell, I think there's a lot of victories there. Nothing really bad can happen, or we can just plug it into the whole idea of a cool down, which we don't hear talked about a lot. We don't see a lot of people doing it for the social reasons that I just discussed. So I think that's some things that can hopefully help. And even if it's a couple minutes, maybe there's a way to have people stay while the next session starts. Stretching after you train is a good idea, and it's something that I think there's some science, if not strings of research, to create a narrative to defend what it is that you want to do. And remember, even if you're nonsense, as long as you have a story, at least you can sit at the table and defend what you're doing. There's probably a lot of things that don't stand up to someone else's level of what should be in the literature. But if you have your own story, now even then, it still might be ridiculous. But I think what I just described is, in my mind, very far from ridiculous. But you're not going to find one research paper to qualify everything that I just said. But there certainly would be research to support the beginning stages of taking a position, and you string things together when you have some experience in these concurrent training processes. So hopefully that all makes sense. Again, stretching after you work out, probably pretty good idea. Anybody seen a leprechaun, by the way? Hey, say yeah.